Ibrahim Traoré was a man like any other. Born under the fierce sun of Burkina Faso, he carried himself with a simplicity that hid his true stature. On this particular afternoon, he walked quietly through a bustling airport, blending into the crowd. Travelers hurried past with their bags, some laughing, some tired, others already arguing. The soundscape was a mix of rolling suitcases, overhead announcements, and scattered conversations. Ibrahim wore no suit, no expensive watch, no polished briefcase. His clothes were plain, his shoes clean but unremarkable, and his small bag carried only what he needed. He entered the first-class lounge and sat silently, holding a ticket for Flight 227 bound for Ouagadougou. Around him, men and women sipped drinks, scrolled through glowing screens, and spoke loudly about business deals. He, however, remained still, watching and listening. A few noticed him. Their eyes lingered, then looked away, only to glance back, again. A black man, alone, dressed simply, sitting among those who assumed wealth and privilege were their birthright. They wondered silently, who is he? Why is he here? He doesn't look like us. But Ibrahim sat peacefully, waiting for his flight, his calmness unshaken by the unspoken questions hanging in the air. When boarding was called, he stepped forward. Handing his ticket to the flight attendant, he expected only the routine smile and gesture toward the jet bridge. Instead, her smile faded. Her eyes scanned him, his clothes, his face, and suspicion tightened her expression. "Excuse me, sir," she said sharply, her arm blocking his way. "You must be lost. This lane is for first class." Ibrahim remained composed. He extended his ticket again. "This is my ticket," he said quietly. She snatched it, her brows furrowing. "Seat 2A?" she murmured, almost to herself, as though the words were a mistake. Then more firmly, "This flight is not for someone of your color. You can't sit here." A hush rippled through those nearby. A young woman gasped. A man in a suit frowned. Several passengers lifted their phones, their cameras capturing the moment. The attendant, whose badge read Clara, raised her voice. "This flight is not for someone like you? You must have booked economy? Maybe someone else used your card?" Ibrahim stood steady, his voice even. "I bought a first-class ticket. Seat 2A belongs to me." Clara laughed coldly. "You can't even pronounce the name of this airline, and you want to sit in first class?" The crowd stirred uneasily. Whispers swirled. A younger attendant wearing glasses approached. "Is everything all right here?" Clara leaned toward him, loud enough for Ibrahim to hear. "This man is trying to force his way into first class with a fake ticket." The young man scanned the ticket with his handheld device. A soft beep sounded, and a green checkmark appeared. "It's valid," he said quietly. Clara's face twisted. "It doesn't matter," she hissed. "Look at him. Do you really think he belongs in seat 2A? Ibrahim stepped aside to let a mother carrying a baby pass. Then he looked back at Clara. His words were firm but calm. "I am not here for drama. I just want to take my seat." The younger attendant looked worried. "Clara, maybe we should just— You want to lose your job over this?" She cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. Ibrahim exhaled slowly and stepped forward. "I will take my seat now," he said. His tone left no room for further argument. Clara froze, her authority slipping away as eyes from every direction pressed on her. At last, she moved aside, muttering venomously as he passed. "Don't say I didn't warn you. Let's see how long you last in that seat." And with that, Ibrahim walked onto the aircraft. The air inside the cabin was cool, scented faintly, of leather and cologne. First class gleamed with polished surfaces and quiet luxury. At the window, seat 2A awaited him. He placed his bag in the overhead bin and sat, pulling out a small notebook. His pen moved gently across the page. No anger, no scowl, not even a sigh. From behind, Clara entered the cabin, her eyes narrowing at him before she turned away to serve the others. Passengers watched discreetly, curiosity growing. In seat 2C, a French businessman adjusted his tie and stole a glance. His name, as Ibrahim would later learn, was François Deur, a wealthy CEO. He said nothing, but his watchful gaze betrayed an interest in the quiet man in 2A. The cabin bell chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. We are preparing for takeoff." As the plane rumbled and lifted into the sky, Ibrahim closed his notebook and looked out the window. The city below vanished into clouds, but inside this plane, a storm of a very different kind had only just begun. The aircraft climbed steadily, cutting through the clouds. The first-class cabin seemed serene, glasses clinking softly, pages of magazines turning, and the faint hum of engines filling the silence. But beneath that polished calm, tension pulsed, like an unseen storm. Ibrahim sat quietly in his window seat, his seatbelt fastened. While others stretched out, ordered champagne, or flipped through newspapers, he remained still, gazing out at the endless horizon. His heart was steady, his mind clear. He had seen storms before, on the ground, in men's hearts. This one, he knew, was no different. Clara began her service down the aisle, her smile perfectly bright, until she reached seat 2A. When she faced Ibrahim, her warmth vanished. She addressed him curtly. "What do you want to drink?" she asked, her voice stripped of courtesy. "Just water, please," Ibrahim replied gently. She rolled her eyes. "Sparkling or still? Pick one." "Still water is fine." She placed the bottle on his tray table with a careless drop, letting it nearly tip. No napkin, no smile, not even a perfunctory "here you go." She turned sharply to serve others. Ibrahim calmly fixed the cap, took a sip, and remained unbothered. François, the businessman in seat 3C, noticed everything. His polished shoes tapped once against the carpet as he frowned. Something about the dignified silence of the man in 2A unsettled him. Ibrahim's calmness, his refusal to respond with anger, carried more weight than any outburst could. Moments later, Clara returned with hot towels for the passengers. She handed them out row by row, but when she reached 2A, she skipped it entirely, moving on as though Ibrahim was invisible. The Frenchwoman seated beside him in 2B frowned, whispering under her breath, "Why does she keep ignoring him? He's done nothing wrong." A man 2 rows back leaned toward his wife. "Maybe she thinks he doesn't belong here," he muttered. Phones discreetly filmed again. The quiet humiliation was being recorded, piece by piece. At the front of the cabin, the young attendant with glasses approached Clara. His voice was low but urgent. "You need to stop treating that man like he doesn't exist. People are noticing. They're filming." Clara's eyes flashed with defiance. "Let them film. Let the whole world see. That seat doesn't belong to people like him. Fine, he bought it, but he doesn't belong here. He knows it. I know it. You're crossing a line," the young man warned. "No," Clara hissed. "He crossed the line. People like him should know their place. They want to sit where they don't belong. Then let them face the pressure." Before the young attendant could reply, the plane jolted violently. A sudden burst of turbulence rattled the cabin, making passengers grip their armrests. Clara strode down the aisle, checking seatbelts. When she reached Ibrahim, she paused, her lips curling in a smirk. "You'd better buckle up tight," she said. "Wouldn't want you flying out of your seat." "Thank you for the reminder," Ibrahim replied calmly, fastening his belt. His evenness seemed to sting her more than anger ever could. She moved on quickly, her authority chipping away with each encounter. When the turbulence subsided, lunch was served. Polished trays of carefully arranged meals were handed out to the first-class passengers. When Clara reached Ibrahim, she dropped his tray a little too hard on the table. "Here," she said coldly, Hope this meets your standards. Ibrahim nodded once. Thank you. Francois had seen enough. His jaw tightened. He leaned slightly toward Clara as she turned to leave. His voice was quiet but firm, carrying the weight of authority. Excuse me, why are you treating that man with such disrespect? Clara froze, then snapped back. Sir, please mind your business. Francois did not flinch. I am minding my business. I paid for peace in this cabin, not to watch you insult a paying passenger. Other passengers nodded. Someone clapped once, the sound sharp in the silence. Clara's face turned crimson. She spun on her heel and stormed into the galley, her composure unraveling. Inside, she paced like a trapped animal, muttering under her breath. How dare they defend him? Who does he think he is? Back in seat 2A, Ibrahim closed his eyes. Breathing slowly, he had weathered storms before. Storms of hate, storms of ignorance. Yet this one was different. This was not about a ticket or even the color of a man's skin alone. It was about dignity and how easily it could be denied. He reached into his pocket and touched a folded piece of cloth, an emblem of Burkina Faso. He had not worn it today. He didn't need to. It was enough that it lived in his heart. Far ahead, the captain's voice crackled through the intercom. Cabin crew, prepare for arrival. 30 minutes to landing. But Ibrahim knew that the real landing had not yet come. The plane carried more than passengers. It carried a lesson waiting to unfold. The hours in the air passed slowly, tension clinging to the cabin like an invisible fog. Passengers shifted in their seats, exchanging quiet glances, whispering what they had seen. Ibrahim, however, remained unmoved, his posture straight, his face calm, his eyes fixed on the shifting tapestry of clouds outside. When the announcement came, 30 minutes to landing, the cabin stirred with renewed energy. Trays were cleared, bags zipped, and passengers prepared for arrival. Clara reappeared in the aisle one last time, her arms folded, her voice cold as steel. She paused by seat 2A. Next time, I hope you choose the right cabin, she sneered. You're lucky we didn't throw you out before takeoff. Ibrahim looked up at her, his voice steady, every word carrying quiet weight. Sometimes the seat we choose is not about money. It is about what we represent. I will keep choosing. This seat, not for comfort, but for what must change. The words struck Clara like a blade. She did not fully understand them, yet they unsettled her, forcing her to step back. As the plane began its descent, Ouagadougou's lights twinkled below, sparkling like a field of stars scattered across the earth. The wheels touched down with a gentle bounce, drawing a soft clap from some passengers. Others stretched, yawned, or prepared their phones to connect to the local network. But in first class, eyes lingered on Ibrahim. Clara wasn't done. As seatbelts unfastened, she leaned in close to him, her voice lowered to a poisonous whisper. I wish you never entered this flight. You smell like someone who hasn't bathed in a month. You think sitting in first class makes you clean? It doesn't. It only makes this cabin stink. Ibrahim blinked once, his gaze meeting hers, calm, unwavering, unbroken. He said nothing. The Frenchwoman in 2B had seen Clara leaning in and caught the expression on her face. Though she couldn't hear every word, she heard enough. That's enough, the woman said sharply. Stay out of this, Clara snapped. No, the woman replied firmly, her pearls trembling slightly with the force of her words. You've gone too far. You're out of control. Clara gave a nervous laugh, glancing around for support. You think he belongs here? Look at him. At that moment, Francois stood. He adjusted his suit jacket and fixed Clara with a steady, condemning gaze. Clara, he said, his voice cutting through the cabin. You have embarrassed yourself. You have embarrassed this airline, and you have embarrassed all of us. Her mouth opened, but no words came. This man, Francois continued, pointing toward Ibrahim, has done nothing wrong. He paid for his seat. He sat quietly, with more grace and dignity than you could ever understand. You may not know who he is, but I can tell he is a man of great worth. Clara's face flushed crimson with anger and shame. She stammered, I did what I thought was right. We have standards here. No, Francois interrupted sharply. What you have is prejudice. That's what you've shown us today by... Now, several passengers had gathered in the aisle, some with their phones still recording. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the cabin. The atmosphere shifted. The balance of power had slipped from Clara's hands. Then the cabin door opened. With a hiss, a cool breeze swept inside. Passengers looked out the windows and gasped. On the tarmac below, a sleek black car waited, flanked by 5 soldiers standing at attention. A long red carpet stretched from the steps of the aircraft to the vehicle. Is there a celebrity on this flight? Someone whispered. Maybe royalty, another suggested. Clara looked confused, whispering to herself. We didn't get any VIP alert. The young attendant with glasses approached, holding up his phone. Clara, you need to see this. She grabbed it and froze. On the screen was a photo of the quiet man in 2A, not seated on an aircraft, but standing tall in full military uniform before thousands of people. Flags rippled behind him. Soldiers saluted in unison. The headline beneath the image read, President Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso. Clara's hands trembled violently. No, this can't be, she whispered, her throat tight. But it was too late. Ibrahim rose from seat 2A, calmly lifting his small bag from the overhead bin. As he moved toward the exit, Clara found her voice. Wait, sir, she called, her tone suddenly soft, desperate. Her lips quivered. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. Ibrahim turned, his gaze steady, gentle yet firm. Would it have made a difference if you had known? Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. He spoke again, his words quiet but resounding. Respect is not a gift reserved for the powerful. It is a duty to every human being. And with that, he stepped off the plane, into the bright African sun, where soldiers saluted sharply. A door to the black car opened before him, but he paused, turning back once to look at the aircraft. Behind, the windows. Passengers stared down, some with tears glistening in their eyes, others shaking their heads in shame. Francois followed, hurrying to catch up. His voice was low, humble. Mr. President, please forgive us. I had no idea. You carry yourself with such humility. It is admirable. Ibrahim smiled faintly. Sometimes we must walk low to see how deep people's hearts are. The 2 men shook hands. Inside the cabin, Clara collapsed into an empty seat, her face pale, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The young attendant stood beside her, his voice soft but cutting. You didn't just insult a president, you insulted every one of us who looks like him. The captain stepped out of the cockpit, his face stern. Prepare a written report, Clara, and expect to be questioned. Clara buried her face in her hands. Outside, flashes from cameras lit the air. The red carpet stretched on. And Ibrahim, who had flown as a simple man in seat 2A, now stepped into the car not with pride but with purpose. His journey transformed into a lesson that the whole world was about to hear. Long before the last suitcase was unloaded from the aircraft, the story had already begun to spread. Passengers had filmed everything. Clara's accusations, her dismissive smirks, Francois's sharp rebuke, and the quiet strength of the man in seat 2A. By the time Ibrahim's car left the runway, those clips were racing across social media. Anger, disbelief, and shame swept through online spaces. Some were horrified that a sitting president could be treated that way. Others were struck by Ibrahim's composure, by how he had endured the humiliation without raising his voice. Many were inspired. Inside the airport, whispers spread like wildfire among staff. Did you hear? The president of Burkina Faso was on that flight, and Clara insulted him. Clara herself now sat in a small office near the jet bridge, her uniform suddenly heavy, her skin pale. The airline manager paced in front of her, his voice tight with restrained fury. "Do you realize what you've done?" he demanded. I didn't know," Clara whispered. "That's not the point." His voice cracked like a whip. "It's not about who he is. It's about what you said. You told a man, this flight is not for someone of your color. You told him he smelled like someone who hadn't bathed in a month. Do you understand the weight of those words?" Tears streamed down her face. "I was just doing my job." "No," the manager snapped. "You were abusing your position, and it's not the first time. Do you think we haven't had complaints before?" Clara froze. The truth she had ignored now stood before her like a mirror she could not turn away from. Meanwhile, outside the airport, Ibrahim sat calmly in his black car. The airport director hovered beside him, wiping sweat from his brow. "Mr. President," he stammered, "we are deeply sorry. If we had known—" Ibrahim raised his hand, stopping him. His eyes were sharp, his words measured. "That is the problem. You only care when you know. But respect is not reserved for titles. It is owed to every human being." The director's voice faltered. "She has already been removed from duty, sir." Ibrahim nodded, saying nothing more. His silence was heavier than any speech. A reporter pushed forward through the crowd. "Mr. President, will you press charges?" Ibrahim shook his head. "No, I do not need to jail anyone to make a point. The whole world has already seen what happened. Let that be enough." That evening, under the golden lights outside the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim stood before cameras and microphones. He wore his military jacket, the flag of Burkina Faso pinned proudly to his chest. Journalists leaned forward, pens poised, recorders running. His voice was steady, deliberate. "This morning, I boarded a plane as a regular passenger. I did not wear a title. I carried no entourage. I did not need people to know my name. What I received, however, was more than poor service. It was hate. It was disrespect. It was shame. Not just for me, but for those who believe that power only wears a suit, that skin color decides status." He paused, letting the words settle. The crowd was silent, hanging on every syllable. "I want the world to understand. No human is above another. You do not need to be a president to be treated with respect. You only need to be a person." Applause rippled through the gathered crowd. Some shouted, "Yes!" Others wiped away tears. Then Ibrahim raised his hand. His voice softened, yet carried. "Even farther. I forgive her." Gasps spread through the audience. Reporters exchanged stunned looks. "Yes," he repeated firmly. "I forgive her, not because I am weak, but because the lesson has been delivered. She has seen the consequences of her actions. Now it is for her to choose, to grow, or to remain small." He ended with a single line that would echo far beyond Burkina Faso. "True power is not in the title you carry, it is in how you treat others." That night, the story spread across Africa, Europe, and beyond. Schools, homes, and offices shared it. Teachers used it as a lesson. Students debated it in classrooms. Across the world, people repeated the same warning: judge no one by their appearance, for you never know who they are. But in her room far away, Clara sat alone, staring at the glow of her phone screen. Her eyes were red, her body weary. She had not eaten. She could not sleep. The guilt pressed down on her chest like a weight. When she heard Ibrahim's words, "I forgive her," she broke. Tears streamed freely. For the first time, she sat at her desk not as a flight attendant, but as a penitent woman. She wrote slowly, carefully in her own hand. Dear President Ibrahim Traoré, I am sorry. Not because you are a president, but because you are a human being, and I failed to treat you as one. I was blind with pride, poisoned by ignorance. You showed me a strength I have never seen. You had every right to humiliate me, and yet you forgave me. I will never forget this lesson. I pray I can prove I have changed. She signed it simply. Clara. The letter was sent. She did not know if he would read it, but she hoped, and at the presidential palace, as dawnlight spilled into his study, Ibrahim did read it. Her words were plain but honest, no excuses, no pretenses, only regret and a promise to change. He folded the letter gently and placed it in a drawer. For Ibrahim, the journey in seat 2A was no longer his alone. It had become a mirror for the world. Days turned into weeks, yet the story of the man in seat 2A did not fade. In Burkina Faso, the president's calm defiance and forgiveness became a rallying cry. In Europe, many saw it as a shameful reflection of prejudice still lurking in polished places. And for Clara, it became a turning point she could not escape. She was suspended from her job, stripped of her wings, and left waiting for the airline's final verdict. But instead of sitting idle, she sought redemption. Every morning, she walked to a local shelter for immigrants and refugees. She tied on an apron, washed dishes, scrubbed floors, served meals. Her once perfectly manicured hands now carried trays of food and folded stacks of donated clothing. At first, the people avoided her. They saw only another uniformed stranger. But over time, Clara began to listen to the stories of hardship, of survival, of dignity stripped and rebuilt. She learned to serve without being asked, to see people not as categories but as souls. One morning, she noticed a little African girl sitting alone in a corner, clutching a torn teddy bear. Clara knelt beside her. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Aminata," the girl whispered. "That's a beautiful name," Clara said with a gentle smile. The child's eyes dimmed. "At school they call me dirty." Clara's heart shattered. She shook her head fiercely. "They are wrong. You are not dirty, Aminata. You are beautiful, just like your name." That night, Clara cried again. But this time, the tears were not of shame, but of awakening. She began to understand the weight of words, how easily they could scar even the smallest of hearts. She picked up her pen once more and wrote to Ibrahim. "Dear Mr. President, I don't expect a reply, but I need you to know I am changing. Not because I was caught, but because I was wrong. Every day I meet people who remind me of you. Quiet, gentle, full of worth. I see them now. Truly see them. Thank you for your silence." It shouted loud enough to wake me up. She signed it again. Clara. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim sat at Tati, his desk in the presidential palace. The morning sun spilled across stacks of letters from citizens, children, teachers, and workers, all inspired by the story. His assistant entered, carrying a folder brimming with more. "Mr. President, we've received hundreds of messages, letters of support from citizens, apologies from airline staff, even artwork from children. The people are touched, sir." Ibrahim nodded, scanning a drawing from a school child showing a dark-skinned man seated calmly in 2A, while a storm raged around him. He placed it down gently. "I didn't plan for this," he said quietly. "I only wanted peace that day." His assistant smiled faintly. "But your silence spoke louder than 1,000 speeches." Ibrahim stood, gazing out at the city beyond the palace walls. "It is not enough to forgive. We must educate. What happened on that flight is a mirror. It shows us what still lives in many hearts. Prepare a national campaign. Call it the Dignity Project." His assistant lifted his pen. "What will it involve, sir?" Teach respect in schools. Train workers in customer service. Promote kindness at all levels. Let this story be more than news. Let it be change. The assistant's eyes brightened. Yes, Mr. President. And so a project was born, not from policy papers, but from a moment of prejudice and the silence that answered it. Meanwhile, in France, Clara's journey continued. She did not return to work. Instead, she immersed herself in service, humbled daily by the people she once overlooked. She scrubbed bathrooms with her own hands, folded clean sheets for weary travelers, and carried heavy boxes into storerooms without complaint. Slowly, the arrogance that had once clung to her like perfume began to wash away. At night, she replayed Ibrahim's words in her mind. Respect is not a gift for the powerful. It is a duty to every human being. They had cut her deeply once, but now they guided her like a lantern in the dark. The proud flight attendant who once ruled aisles with authority was learning, step by step, how to serve, not as an act of duty, but as an act of dignity. And beyond her small acts of change, the world had begun to stir. The story of Seat 2A was no longer about one man and one woman. It had become a lesson retold in classrooms, offices, churches, mosques, and homes, a reminder that titles fade, uniforms crumble, but respect is eternal.